the Russia drag in a way, tweeting that the stock market hit another all-time high yesterday, despite the Russia hoax story, and also jobs numbers are starting to look very good. White House counselor Kellyanne Conway claims the collusion talking point is plain old tired, and to make her case, she actually turned to props.
I just want to review, in case you run out of time. This is how I see it so far. This is to help all the people at home. What's the conclusion? Collusion? No, we don't have that yet. I see illusion and delusion. So just so we're clear, everyone, 4 words. Conclusion, collusion, no. Illusion, delusion, yes. I just thought we'd have some fun with words. Sesame's Grover word of the day, perhaps, Sean.
Margaret, fun with words there. She's talking about Sesame Street and Grover and collusion and delusion. One of the things she said here, which seemed to be maybe a slip of the tongue, she said, no, we don't have collusion yet, which seems to not be a great message.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the threshold for why the past week was so important is not that it proved something specific, that happened. It's that it opened up a revelation that had been off the table for months now. Consistently, the president and all the top aides and stuff had said, there's nothing here. There's nothing. No one met with anyone. Nobody knows any of these people. This is all just made up. And this proves that that wasn't right. And so there's a whole lot that isn't known now, including what the U.S. intelligence agencies knew about any of this and when they knew it. We still don't know that. Who else was involved? What were these discussions? But the reason why this week is so pivotal is that the entire Republican majority in Congress has been asked to stand by the president and support him through some very difficult times, and has made the calculation that it behooves them to do this. Number one, because there was no evidence of anything to the contrary, just a lot of smoke, no fire, right? And number two, because of the belief, the strategic belief that the president's fortunes and their fortunes kind of rise or fall together. This has shaken that very fundamentally in terms of what they can believe, what they want to attach their name to. Not for everyone in the majority, but for enough people that it could become problematic for the White House. The White House needs to be able to keep the confidence of a key number of important Republican lawmakers in the House and Senate. And fundamentally, the revelations this week, because they were a surprise, foundationally shook some of those relationships.
And one of the things some of these, the poll out of the Washington Post shows in terms of how registered voters are seeing this, 60% that believe that Russia tried to influence the election, and 40% believe that the Trump campaign intentionally aided Russia to influence the election. And among the GOP, there's something of a difference. The belief is that 33% believe that Russia tried to influence the election. Now, 33%, not a small amount.
Yeah,
for the GOP.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, the intelligence community has said that Russia did, in fact, try to meddle in the election. The question is whether or not any Trump associates did work and coordinate in any way. And getting back to Margaret's point, I think is an important one, that the number of Republicans on the Hill for months have dismissed the calls or the suggestion that there was collusion, saying there's no evidence, there's no evidence. This Don Jr. meeting doesn't mean that they're rushing to say there's collusion. A number of them said, we need to investigate, we need to look into it. Now they're being a little bit less definitive on their conclusion. Even the Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman, Richard Burr, earlier this summer, I had asked him about collusion. Do you see any evidence there? He said, at this point, I haven't seen a lot of it publicly. I asked him about it in light of the Don Jr. meeting. He said, we need to investigate this further, and we are at the beginning of our investigation.
And that's significant for all of Kellyanne Conway and other advisors to say there's no collusion. The Republicans on Capitol Hill say we need to investigate this to see if there is. But this drip, drip, drip sort of situation for the last, all these weeks. We're at the 6-month point this week. Everyone knows the best time to get anything done in an administration is out of the gate on tax reform, on infrastructure and healthcare. They do not have any significant accomplishments. That's why all of this matters here. The sense that there's not been a full sort of sense of all these meetings, a lot of Republicans wish they would just sort of come together. If there are other meetings, let's get them all out there this summer right now. It just hasn't happened.
And this is what we heard from John McCain as well as Trey Gowdy last week on this whole Russia story.
Sucking the oxygen out of the room, everybody knows that. I think it's very difficult when you have this overwhelming barrage of new information that unfolds every few days.
The amnesia of people that are in the Trump orbit. Someone close to the president needs to get everyone connected with that campaign in a room and say, from the time you saw Dr. Zhivago until the moment you drank vodka with a guy named Boris, you list every single one of those, and we're going to turn them over to the special counsel, because this drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration.
And Corin, this criticism has been expressed privately, as we all know, among Republicans, but spilling out into the public here with Trey Gowdy.
Yeah, and Trey Gowdy is especially important because he's not only one of the triumvirate of Republicans that was named to take over the investigation from Devin Nunes in the House Intelligence Committee, he also has the gavel now on House Oversight and had been holding back. Maybe he will change his mind about that in terms of looking into this stuff. Look, I think that the poll also reflected something that is unfortunate. We're talking about, excuse me, the Russia probe taking attention away from things like healthcare and other agenda issues. What about just from the issue of Russia and election meddling in general? It's like a willful, to have only 33% of Republicans say that they believe Russia even tried to meddle, not successfully, but tried to, is a willful ignoring of what Russia does all over the world. This is kind of how they choose to project power. They do not have the military power we do. They do not have the economic power they do. They do have the ability to do messaging. And they've been doing it in the satellite, former Soviet Union, former Iron Curtain states, pushing into Europe, now pushing into the United States. And it's become such a Trump story that no one is talking about the fact that this is actually a very big concern for the upcoming elections. And just one other thing on Kellyanne Conway is that somebody is going to screenshot that picture of her holding those two words,
change it,
bring a red
of the White House.
Right.
Yeah,
If you're
I'm sure it's already happened.
Bring a red Sharpie to cross out the collusion thing. Otherwise, everyone's going to use that.
I do want to throw in two caveats, though. One is that if the president were someone else, without this sort of cloud of Russia questions over him, and they were dealing with cyber concerns or meddling or hacking concerns, only part of it would be a public campaign. Of course, most of what they were doing would be classified, would never be discussed, would never be discussed with Putin in a meeting, would never be threatened. So it's important to kind of remember that. It doesn't mean they're doing, we don't really know what they're doing, it doesn't mean they're doing nothing. But the second is that I do think that this move to beef up the legal team, both on the outside and on the inside with the naming of Ty Cobb to part of the White House team, is obviously the White House's effort to get their head around this and begin managing it. It probably should have happened several weeks
and you've got you've got Republicans, some Republicans, Dave Brandt, for instance, and here he is talking about Democrats and saying essentially they're getting way ahead of their skis in terms of talking about this.
You got to separate out the political. We have a probe going forward on the Russia piece. On the political piece, if you find a statute that's been violated, then you got it. But, my senators in Virginia are getting, apoplectic. Mark Warner seeing smoke everywhere he goes like he's in a Cheech and Chong movie. And Kane now thinks the sun is worse than Benedict Arnold. I mean, we've gotten a little hysterical, and we should just get grounded.
Well, that's a great line. No matter
right.
what you think of it.
Yeah.
So that just shows you that even as some Republicans want to look at this further, there are still a number who say there's still nothing there, and Democrats may be going too far and pushing this line.
Also, Mark Warner is so straight-laced with the idea of administration.
Next, from frenemies to besties. Presidents Trump and Macron shake on it for a long time. How France's leader wooed Trump on the world stage.
Today we're at Eats.
Everywhere he goes, the Russia story follows. The president's son now caught in its current.
This is all of it. This is everything. This is everything.
Shifting explanations and a growing number inside the room at a meeting with Russians.
I think it's a meeting that most people in politics probably would have taken.
And after a long goodbye, the president returns home to a stalled Senate and an unfulfilled health care campaign promise.
I am sitting in the Oval Office with a pen in hand, waiting for our senators to give it to me.
Inside politics, the biggest stories sourced by the best reporters now. Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Mia Malika Henderson, filling in for John King. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, thanks for sharing a bit of your Sunday with us. The Russia revelations keep coming from the Trump White House. First came last weekend's story about a 2016 meeting involving Donald Trump Jr., other members of Team Trump, and a Russian lawyer. Trump Jr. then releases a statement and claims the meeting was about Russian adoption. And a few days later, his story changes with the release of Trump Jr.'s emails with publicist Rob Goldstone, who set up the meeting. The emails reveal the president's son took the meeting after being told that the lawyer had Kremlin ties and would offer up dirt on Hillary Clinton. And on the same day the emails come out, this from Donald Trump Jr.
So as far as you know, as far as this incident is concerned, this is all of it. This is everything. This is everything.
But it wasn't everything. CNN has now learned there were more people in that meeting than previously reported, perhaps at least 8. We now know the meeting included Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and then campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Also in the room, the Russian lawyer and publicist Rob Goldstone, who helped set up the encounter. On Friday, a Russian-American lobbyist revealed he was also present. And a source tells CNN possibly 2 others were there as well, a translator and a representative of a Russian family that asked Goldstone to reach out to the Trump campaign. President Trump has called the idea of collusion between his team and Russia a hoax and a witch hunt. But on Thursday, he took a somewhat different approach while defending his son.
I have a son who's a great young man. He's a fine person. He took a meeting with a lawyer from Russia. It lasted for a very short period, and nothing came of the meeting. And I think it's a meeting that most people in politics probably would have taken.
The president is awake this morning and tweeting about fake news again, but this isn't a fake poll. The latest Washington Post ABC News survey shows the president's approval rating has fallen to a dismal 39% among registered voters, and it's even lower, 36% among all Americans. With us to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Jeff Zeleny, Karin Demerjen of The Washington Post, Margaret Talev of Bloomberg, and CNN's Manu Raju. Thanks for being with us this morning. Jeff, I'm going to start with you. It feels like in some ways the word bombshell may have been overused in terms of this Russia story, but in this instance, bombshell might be an appropriate word to use when you think about the meeting, the contents of the meeting, and the shifting stories about the substance of the meeting and who was in there.
I think it probably is appropriate. And, you know, there have been so many incremental developments in this entire Russia story, but I think let's take stock of the last week. And this indeed is a different moment, a different set of information we've learned, because we've learned for the first time, if we go a week ago to what we were discussing, we didn't have the contents of the emails. Really what you think about has come up in the last week is pretty extraordinary. It marks the first time that someone from the Trump campaign accepted a meeting with someone from the Russian government or someone who is representing them. Now, this is something we still do not know if there was actually any information that was exchanged, but it shows the willingness to open the door to that. And it shows the fact that no one thought that there was anything wrong with doing that. And it also shows that it has taken this Trump inner circle. This is what frustrates people inside the White House so much, many people. It has taken them day after day after day after day to explain this. There have been 4 different versions of events, and now we're still finding out at least 8 people in the room. That's not what the president's oldest son said when he was on Fox earlier this week. So this is why that investigators on Capitol Hill, Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican of Iowa, wants to talk to the president's oldest son. So this week is it marks a turning point in this, and we're only at June 9th, 2016 in the campaign. We do not know if they had other meetings. We don't know what other emails are out there. It showed that they were willing to listen, and that is unusual. Despite what the president says it's standard practice, it's not standard practice.
We're still learning more about what happened here, too, because 2 weeks ago, our colleague at CNN, Evan Perez, reached out to the White House, informed them that he was aware about what happened here. And then what happened the next day? There was a $50,000 payment from the Trump campaign to Donald Trump Jr.'s attorney. And we're learning more about that information as well. But
which means he hired him on that.
Exactly. And are we saying the president, who said he only learned it a couple of days ago, did he learn at that point? We don't know exactly. We don't know the full story about what the president knew and when he knew it, to use to coin a phrase.
Yeah.
But there are. When I interviewed Adam Schiff on Friday, the top Democrat in the House Intelligence Committee, he did not know who was in the meeting. He did not know whether or not this Russian-American lobbyist had ties to Russian intelligence. These are key questions that are going to be continued to probe, that investigators are going to continue to look at. So even as the White House wants to downplay it and say there's nothing there, there's going to be a lot more focus on this going forward.
And in terms of how the public sees it, the Washington Post out with a poll among registered voters. 63% think this meeting that Don Jr. had was inappropriate. 27% think it was appropriate. There's, of course, a partisan breakdown. 33% of GOPers think it was inappropriate. 85% of Democrats think it was inappropriate. Margaret, in some ways, you have the president using something sort of like a babe in the woods excuse for his son, right? Calling him a kid, a good boy, stretching the definition of who I think is considered a boy. Donald Trump Jr. is 39 years old. And so, I mean, what do you make of the White House's messaging on this, particularly from the president?
It's been a tremendous challenge for the White House to figure out how to message this. And it's still hard to tell whether it's because they knew a lot more than they were letting on to, or because they didn't know everything they needed to know, and they're now trying to play catch up. There are some legal complications with the White House trying to figure out what Don Jr. knew, since Don Jr. doesn't actually work for the administration. But there are two elements that happened in the past week that demonstrates why this is a turning point. One is the decision or the revelation of how much of the campaign of the re-election funds are now being used or sequestered away for legal fees. And the second is the White House's decision to bring on Ty Cobb to serve this function inside the counsel's shop. So you now have attorneys now who do ethics issues, national security issues, and now a specialized attorney in the counsel's office for Russia. So that Don McGahn, the general counsel, doesn't have to kind of juggle everything else. Plus this, what this shows me is that they are prepared now to dig in for a much longer fight and duration of issues related to this than they initially thought they might need to.
And one of the lawyers is Jay Sekulow, who'll be on our air and on lots of programs.
In the private attorney.
In the private attorney. And he was on our air. And here's what he had to say in terms of the framing of what he thinks went on here.
What law was violated by that meeting? And your experts have said it too. Nothing. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about.
I mean, okay, so when you're talking about coordination and collusion, it has to be to do something. But the question is still open about what was the something, right? Is it to, even if it's the adoptions thing, which does not seem very plausible, that is maybe to talk about sanctions, because that's what the adoption response from Moscow was in response to when we passed the Magnitsky Act. That would be technically a violation of the Logan Act, even though nobody enforces it, but that's actually a thing. Was it collusion to actually get the dirt on Hillary Clinton the way that we thought, that it seems to be presented in the emails? That is potentially a thing that people have said, look, if that is the case, then you're talking about maybe violating federal election law, which says you can't take anything of value, which usually is a financial donation, but could be argued by a good lawyer that it's a dirt on a candidate, on your opposing candidate is something of value from a foreign entity or source. So all of these open questions still, we cannot say at this point absolutely nothing went wrong. At this point, there's not a full case to be brought up in front of a court, but that's what people are investigating, is what was the goal of this meeting, because this clearly shows some sort of an intent to work together, which could help you establish some sort of...
And one of the things that's complicating, I think, the messaging in causing, I think, frustration among Republicans is the fact that this is family, right? Right. And you have the New Yorker taking note of that with this magazine cover. And, of course, it shows Don Jr. there, as well as Jared Kushner, and a Republican, Bill Flores, out of Texas. Here is what he had to say about the family ties around in this White House.
I would say I think it would be in the president's best interest if he removed all of his children from the White House, not only Donald Trump, but Ivanka and Jared Kushner. And so I wish that he would get them out of the way so that we could have the professional staff at the White House.
I think that's pretty interesting, because it also, this is the first time it really has come home to the president's inner circle and family. Now, I think it's important to point out that the president's son does not work in the administration. Right. So he is not subject to the same security implications and regulations. But the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is at the center of most of this. And that is the potential issue here. And I heard more Republicans this week and supporters of this president, people who want him to succeed, who are more alarmed now than they were a week ago, because for the last year we've been hearing there was no Russia meeting. It's absolutely not, it's all being made up. Now it's not being made up. He released the email. But the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who's still operating with an interim security clearance as a senior advisor to the White House, you have to wonder if he's sort of questioning his decision to come into the administration now, because he is in the thick of it, and that is where some of the real concern lies.
And this is going to undercut him in so many key ways. I mean, he's so important to this.
To everything, yeah.
Everything. And this cloud continues to hang over him. But this is one reason why they created the anti-nepotism statutes, is because they did not want someone who's compromised as a relative. It's sometimes harder for a president to fire someone you're related to. But of course, the Trump White House has said that does not apply within the White House. But this makes it harder to remove someone who's family.
And you have Democrats, particularly Nancy Pelosi, saying that Jared Kushner shouldn't have a security clearance, and you imagine you'll start to hear that more from Democrats, possibly some Republicans as well. Up next, one step forward, two steps back. The Senate Majority Leader puts out his new health care plan, then puts off a key vote. Will the extra time help him or hurt him? But first, politicians say and do the darndest things. President Obama went between two ferns. Now, former President Bill Clinton brings us between two bushes. Clinton and George W. Bush paired up for a talk on leadership, offering this wise advice.
I think he would tell you that the best thing can happen to you in your politics is to be consistently underestimated.
That's pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Care bill has been delayed again, this time because Senator John McCain is in Arizona recovering from surgery.
As President Trump's agenda stalls and the Russia controversy swirls, a new Washington Post poll shows the president's approval dropping to 36%.
Also, we're learning the president's re-election campaign paid $50,000 to the law firm now representing Donald Trump Jr.
And former FBI Director James Comey is writing a new book. It will detail his experiences in public service, could reveal new details about his role in the 2016 election and his interactions with President Trump before he was fired.
Do you remember this moment from the president's trip to Paris? Well, Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop is among those criticizing President Trump for his remarks to the French First Lady this week. She talked about it in an interview with Australian media. Watch this.
If he said that to you, would you be flattered or offended?
I'd be taken aback, I think. It's a rather interesting comment to make. I wonder if she could say the same of him.
President Trump often leans on his base of evangelical supporters as his support, but two close confidants of Pope Francis are blasting Trump and his supporters for what the religious leaders call a xenophobic and Islamophobic vision. They wrote in the Catholic Journal this: the panorama of threats to their understanding of the American way of life have included modernist spirits, the Black Civil Rights Movement, the hippie movement, communism, feminist movements, and so on. And now in our day, there are the migrants and the Muslims. Daniel Burke, CNN religion editor, with us now. First of all, talk to us about that statement.
Well, it's really a remarkable article, Christy. As you mentioned, it's written by two men who are pretty close to this Pope, so we don't know that this is what the Pope thinks, but we know that the people who are talking to the Pope think this. It calls out Steve Bannon, the president's advisor, by name for promoting a apocalyptic vision in which the Christian West battles Islam. It really says that the union between Catholics and evangelicals in American politics is built on hatred of other groups. They call them a community of combatants at one point. And what the article makes the point is this is really contrary to the way the Pope thinks, who's trying to build bridges to other groups, particularly Muslims, at a time when divisions between religions is really dangerous. So the article makes the point that as the U.S. Evangelicals and Catholics continue down this road, it could get even more dangerous.
Okay, so Father Spadaro explained what he meant behind his words to America Magazine. And I want to read you what he said, quote, "The central question is the mutual manipulation between politics and religion, which is a risk that is not exclusive to the United States. It's constant risk. Often this fundamentalism is born from the perception of a threat of a world that is threatened, a world that is collapsing. And so it responds with a religion from a reading of the Bible transformed into an ideological message of fear. It's a manipulation of anxiety and insecurity." Daniel, on some level, hasn't religion always influenced in some way or manipulated politics, even though they're supposed to be separate?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you remember, the first people, the first colonists who came to the United States came strictly because of religion. They set up theocracies in the United States, the first pilgrims. So this has always been a thread within American politics. I think what Father Spadaro is looking at this through a European lens and saying that maybe it's time for Catholics and evangelicals in the United States to rethink this and for them to kind of take a step back from politics. It's unusual, though, to hear a Catholic priest make this argument. This is not an argument that we've heard Pope Francis make. In fact, he wants Catholics to bring their values to government, bring their values to the polls. So I would have liked him to delve into that argument a little bit more, show how Pope Francis himself exemplifies exactly what he's calling for, the separation of church and state.
Daniel, is there a gauge of how expansive the evangelical support really is for Donald Trump, and do they believe Donald Trump to be a true Christian?
Well, the second question, part of the question, I'm not sure, but the first part is, according to surveys, white evangelicals, two-thirds back him, according to an April poll. They support the job that he's doing. You know, he often presents himself as the protector of evangelicals. When he speaks to evangelical groups, he says, as long as I am president, no one is ever going to stop you from praying. No one is ever going to stop you from speaking in the manner that you want to. But you could make the argument that evangelicals also protect this president, and while his approval ratings among some groups have been slipping, among evangelicals, they certainly have not. Two-thirds still approve of the way that he's doing his job as president.
All righty. Daniel Burke, we appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, some women in Silicon Valley are now talking about sexual harassment there. Next, we're going to hear from 6 women who gave CNN their firsthand accounts.
It was about ego and power. It was the moment that I felt my leg being grabbed under the table that I thought, holy moly, this is real.
Also, the woman who wanted to marry ISIS fighters. Were they tricked with false promises? Were they willing partners in horrific crimes? We're taking you to a refugee camp next, where many are being held, and they are telling us quite the stories. Well, the mothers, wives, girlfriends of ISIS fighters, some of them flocked to ISIS based on promises ISIS was making to them. So people are wondering, are they willing supporters of what we've seen ISIS doing, or are these innocent victims who are drawn in by false promises?
Nick Payton-Wall spoke with women being held in a refugee camp. But first, it's important to point out that these women have not been charged in what is essentially a lawless area. They've been rounded up as ISIS sympathizers until authorities can figure out what to do with them. Here's Nick Payton-Walsh.
Don't kid yourself. They saw the videos. Girls, mothers, some who married into ISIS, who knew what they were about, but still came. Now, jailed in a refugee camp, stuck in limbo as ISIS collapses, trying to go home. They want your pity, and that you believe them when they say it was all of it, a huge mistake.
They use women for sex.
Yeah, it's very disgusting.
3 Indonesian sisters say they paid thousands of dollars to get here, lured by the false promise of free healthcare and schools, but ended up living off selling their jewellery and paying thousands to get smuggled out. It just wasn't as pure a caliphate as they expected.
They said they want to fisabilillah, they want to jihad for the sake of Allah. But what they think, what they want, it's only about women and sex. It's disgusting. It makes us want.
I heard that if they marry a widow, they will get thousands of dollars.
Single women arrivals like them kept in a commune while they look for husbands.
The manner of the woman inside the dorm, it's very different. It's very far from Islam. Harsh manner, gossiping, shout each other, backbiting, and fighting between the woman. And oh, I was very surprised when I see that.
Saida explains the dorm is a bit like Tinder.
When the woman arrives in this dormitory, she makes a sort of CV, puts down her age, her name, how her personality is like, what she looks for in a man. And men also post their CVs. Yes, it's dating. So you meet, you talk for 15-20 minutes, and then it's a yes or no. If they both agree, then they get married. It's very quick.
She says she came for charity work, but her husband was killed the second time they tried to flee. She's as appalled by the Paris terror attacks as she was by the coalition bombing of Raqqa, and just wants to go back to France.
I love life. I love to work. I love my jeans. I love my makeup. I love my parents. The only thing I want is to go back. I'm not far from the beach. I used to go to the beach every weekend in a bikini. Yes, in a bikini.
May is a Syrian English teacher whose first husband was killed by a sniper in Homs and says she was travelling to Turkey when she was waylaid in Raqqa, where she met and married a Moroccan, Bilal.
Were you looking for a man when you went to Raqqa? No. So how come you found one just like you moved into a house and oh my God, who's this guy next door?
I think God sent him to me.
She says ISIS spokesman Abu Muhammad Adnani knew Bilal and allowed him not to fight. He's now in jail. She is disapproving of less pure love stories.
Did you hear other stories of women here who came looking for husbands?
They look to the European men that they are here, and in ISIS they are strong men, you know, with guns, and they can protect them. It's an idea that, just like movies, many of them was very shocked because when they get married from a man, you know, 3-4 days, 1 month, and they divorced. I know a woman, she was married 6 times, and after 3 days she go to court and ask the judge to divorce her from him. And when the judge asked her why you want divorce, and that man say that she prevent him from making any, you know, sexual, you know.
Oh, I see.
And she say, I can't accept him. I all the time thinking of my dying husband. And the judge asked her, so why you got married from him if you don't want him? And he say, I will send you to the prison and will, you know, slash you. And she was crying, oh no, it's the last time, I promise.
Her husband was once arrested for smoking by the religious police, and because they won't talk to women, she had to literally enter a man's world to get him out of jail.
And you know what I do? It was a crazy idea. I just put my husband's clothes, his shoes, and his, you know, that wheels, and I covered my eyes, put that black glasses, and I lent a gun from my neighbor. I take it from him, and I take my boy, and let's go to the police part.
Can you do me your man voice now?
Yes, of course.
That's how men sound, just do.
These stories decide their fate here, whether they stay in limbo or go home.
I think that you don't believe me. But, you know, eyes speaks a language more than mouth.
Yes.
And don't you feel that there's a truth in my eyes?
Yes. Your husband, what if you never see him again?
I want someone to kill me. Because I can't kill myself. It's suicide, and I can't commit suicide. Just kill me.
Nick Payton-Walsh, CNN, Ain Alissa, Northern Syria.
Well, there is a scandal in Silicon Valley. Women now coming forward, revealing stories of sexual harassment.
One tells, in fact, of an investor exposing himself to a female entrepreneur. Another woman says she was groped during a business dinner. Now, CNN senior tech correspondent Lori Siegel sat down with them. Please let us forewarn you here. This is not a conversation that is appropriate for children, so we just want to give you a heads up. We want to make sure you understand what's coming out of this here. But Lori Siegel did talk to them, and some fascinating conversations here. Good morning, Lori.
Hey, Christy. Hey, Victor. Well, it's a watershed moment for Silicon Valley. We've heard stories of sexual harassment happening behind closed doors for years, but now those stories are finally coming to the surface. 6 women agreed to speak with us about their personal experiences with sexual harassment in hopes that they can bring about change. Take a listen.
You don't want to tell people that you were in a business meeting and somebody shamed you and made you feel less than. Who wants to say that?
It was the moment that I felt my leg being grabbed under the table that I thought, holy moly, this is real.
We're sitting at a Starbucks and he grabs my face and tries to make out with me. I hate to say this, that it's the norm, and I hope that we can change that. So this is my story. In 2001, the environment was a lot different because of the dot-com crash. So I was faced with raising more money or letting go of employees. So one time I had a meeting with a potential VC, one of the more powerful ones out there, and he ordered a $5,000 bottle of wine. And I couldn't even remember how many times the glass got filled. All of a sudden he was conveying to me how attracted he was to me, tried to lean over to kiss me, and I pulled away. I'll never forget when he touched me under the table and like looked into my eyes and grabbed my leg and squeezed it and say, you know, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do this for you. As if he was my savior or something. And at the same time, he's violating me.
I was lucky enough to have an advisor or mentor who had never expressed any romantic or sexual interest in me, and we were literally working on spreadsheets, the least sexy thing in the world. I remember it, we're sitting side by side in front of a computer.
More than happy to cooperate with everyone. I just want the truth to get out there. I mean, that's part of why I released all this stuff today. I wanted to get it all out there. They're trying to drip, all fairness, you know, they have it. They want to drip a little bit today, drip a little bit then. So I was like, here it is. I'm more than happy to be transparent about it, and I'm more than happy to cooperate with everyone.
So as far as you know, as far as this incident's concerned, this is all of it.
This is everything.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. That was most certainly not everything, because on Friday there was still a lot about the June 2016 meeting with a Kremlin-connected lawyer that we had not yet seen. It turns out that lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, wasn't the only Russian in the room with Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort. Alan Futurefoss, the attorney for Donald Jr., told NBC News that Veselnitskaya came to the meeting with someone who Futurefoss said was introduced as a translator, and a second person who was later identified as a Russian-American lobbyist, Rinat Akhmetshin, a former Soviet counterintelligence officer who some U.S. officials believe has ongoing ties to Russian intelligence. Akhmetshin denies any current ties to Russian spy agencies and says he was working on a campaign to roll back sanctions against Russians accused of human rights violations. But of course, there's no mention of that in Donald Jr.'s email correspondence. What he and the Trump campaign were promised in those emails was some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary Clinton. Information that is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. An extraordinary offer purported to be from the Russian government, but which apparently raised no red flags for Donald Trump Jr., who replied, "If it's what you say, I love it." This week's revelations were the latest in the Trump team's ever-evolving explanations about their relationship to Russia. And we have zero ties to Russia to we have lots of ties, but it's just coincidental. From a meeting with one Russian to a meeting where, according to CNN, at least 8 people were in the room in Trump Tower. So now, is it time to advance the story of Russiagate from the question of whether there was collusion with Russia to the question of what consequences, if any, there will be? And joining me now, MSNBC contributor Malcolm Nance and former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, who's also the senior vice president of the conservative think tank, the Center for Security Policy. So, Fred, I'm going to start with you. And first of all, thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
Okay, so what do you make of, and does it bother you that you have an American presidential campaign who has 3 of its principals, including the son of the candidate, meeting with a Russian former counterintelligence officer and then not telling anyone about it?
Well, I want to say up front, I think that this meeting was a mistake. I think it was a rookie mistake. I think it reflects that the Trump campaign really was an insurgency campaign of people without government experience, and this is something I would have recommended that they not do. But concerning this American citizen, I know he was a dual national who was involved in this meeting. I'll tell you, in meetings I've had throughout my 25-year government career, whenever you meet with Russian or Chinese government officials, think tankers, or lobbyists, there's an assumption that some of them are intelligence officers. So what do? Do you not hold the meeting? Sometimes you might hold the meeting, but you have to protect yourself. You have to have attorneys present. There have to be note takers who take meticulous notes. Those things didn't happen here. Again, rookie mistake, but I don't think this means this was a Russian intelligence operation.
Well, here's the problem with that. If this was the only meeting, if this was the one time that they happened to meet with a Russian lawyer that they knew through this pop star and his manager that knows the Trump family, you could say, okay, maybe they made one mistake. But what you have here is a pattern. I'm going to put up just a little bit of a timeline for you. So in May 19th of 2016, Paul Manafort takes over as the Trump campaign chairman after they pushed out Corey Lewandowski. Then on June 3rd through the 7th, you have these email chains with Rob Goldstone, where he's saying the Russian government wants to help you. I'm not sure how much a rookie you have to be to not be alarmed by that. On June 7th, Trump wins 5 primaries, essentially locks up the nomination, and he comes out and he says there will be a big press conference in which he promises big damning information on Hillary Clinton. Then you have this meeting at Trump Tower on June 9th, and Trump tweets the exact same day that he tweets about Hillary Clinton's missing, quote-unquote, 33,000 emails. Then you have on June 15th, someone calling themselves Guccifer 2.0 releases a DNC opposition file on Trump that it was stolen from the DNC. Then you have WikiLeaks, July 22nd, July 27th. Trump publicly encourages Russia to find the emails that are missing. And then in September, you have this Peter W. Smith going digging for the 33,000 supposed emails. So you have a pattern of meetings over and over and over again, to say nothing of the fact that after the election is over, you have then Jared Kushner meeting again with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak and asking for secure communications as a way he can keep talking to them out of the earshot of U.S. intelligence. Is that rookie mistakes, or is that a pattern?
Well, I think of all the things you listed, the only troubling thing, I don't think it's a pattern, but the Goldstone thing does sound very troubling. Goldstone said that he was trying to set up this meeting because he was trying to provide information on behalf of the Russian government. But my argument is that Goldstone is not credible. He is a playboy celebrity publicist. Here is one of many pictures he's posted of himself on the internet.
He was credible to Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump Jr. said, hey, if you've got information, he's not incredible to him.
The question is whether this person would have been entrusted by the Russian government. Here he is posing as Miss Universe. Whether the Russian government would trust someone like this with sensitive information about efforts to undermine the U.S. election. Here he is posted as a pirate. You see, the question is, this guy might have been a flake and a friend of the family, but the Russian government would never have used this guy or entrusted him with a sensitive intelligence operation. That simply didn't happen.
Malcolm, I'm going to let you in on this.
Yeah.
Is the ridiculousness of Rob Goldstone the main thing we should be focused on here, rather than the plain facts of what we know happened?
No, but I'm going to give Fred an assist here. He's right. Rob Goldstone isn't the kind of person that they would use as an asset. He is not the player in this game. He's merely a communications conduit. And what they would be using him for is to send an email to Donald Trump Jr. and doing exactly what they wanted done at his bidding. He did it because he's the manager of Amin Alagarov, right? The billionaire playboy son of one of the biggest oligarchs in Russia, and it is very, very close to Vladimir Putin. The pathway that, and he should know, coming from, the agency side, if you're going to dangle